Okay, so thank you all for coming. I'm Martin Steele, and I'm going to start, which is not a surprise to some of those who know me, with some quotes. And the first quote is from my dear friend Megan, who said, "Maybe you should say something now." James Joyce from Ulysses, "I am almosting it." Haruki Murakami from Kafka on the Shore, which is a book I just finished, and I didn't know his work until I, for some reason, found it on my shelf. I didn't even know how it got there. And that is, until things happen, they haven't happened. Marcel Proust, "Time devours its own offspring." Mallarmé, "To paint not the thing itself, but the effect which it produces." Aviva Gottlieb Zornberg says, "We weigh and emphasize features of previous worlds in creating new ones." Alchemy of invention. Cervantes, "Events worthy of being recorded and remembered forever." And John Berger, "For imagination is not, as is sometimes thought, the ability to invent. It is the capacity to disclose that which exists." Every artist feels an outsider, an experimenter. It happened, an eyeful, true to life, focused. Snapshots of Murano, masks, cheap hats, household objects. Television patterns, flaming clown, burning circus. Trust it, follow it, face it. Bring the unknown into being. Like Neil Young, honor it at all times. Wednesday of this week, Anne, Bruce, and I discussed Fellini. I subsequently found these notes from 5 years ago in my journal. 8.5. Papa Fellini. What were you hoping for? When you least expect it, step right up and stop right there. A while ago, a study of mine sold at the Talent Gallery that included this dialogue from Fellini's Nights of Cabiria, which I put out on your chairs. And the text is, "Don't just stand there, say something." And I like that because I always hope that people who are rolling by my work might say something once they've had a chance to have a look at what it is I put up on the wall. 2 years ago, I felt constrained by the formal limitations of the rectangle and began making shaped paintings and rounds. One of the first was acquired in 1923 from my show Bright Fictions by the Schneider Museum in Ashland, and it hangs right here on this wall, that yellow piece, for their permanent collection. And my first digital series began using text on patterned dot matrix backgrounds with parenthetical matching photos. So this is an example of one of the first of those series, done in 1992. Per my piece from 92, what we are all doing as artists is shouting in public. The difference in my shouting of 31 years ago and my shouting of today is something that ought to be assessed, measured, and expounded upon. Enlisting inkjet printing and a unique mounting technology, photographic information is used to make paintings, to create work using a new convention of mediums. And the pieces I'm passing around give you an idea of how the work is made. And I can, later on, if you have some questions about that, be happy to answer questions about that. In this compression of info debris, of rubble, in what Walter Benjamin prophesied as the catastrophe of history, time is informed and ever more condensed into our iteration of cultural transformation. My task as an artist is finding inspiration in this compression, stepping aside and searching for relics, coding the dig for the revelation of some truth, foraging for redemption, for what I think is noteworthy, important, curious. Artists of note, my progenitors, those who inspired me to bring me to this point in time, Mark Rothko, who in his later work created paintings of palpable mystery, or Paul Klee, who allowed me to understand the explosive nature of imagination. When recorded and pursued with no reservations, the results are something to take us elsewhere. Pursuing unhindered by hesitation, a direction judged important is the highest possible plane of action in my practice. Following a path suggested by what bursts forth adds strength to what is being conveyed, enhancing structure and historical reference to a given painting, an allegory illustrating the breakdown of experience into fragments presented as a record of that process. Say, for example, I'm attracted to photographing koi fish in a pond. Friends commenting, "Here comes some art." That moment, and perhaps 30 other instances that happened today or 50 years ago, are brought forth to battle and influence each other until a resolution is complete and the group declared a victor. James Joyce. Imagination is nothing but the working over of what is remembered. Paul Bowles. I only know what I intended to do once it's finished. In closing, I'll say, these are two of my quotes. Everything reminds me of something else, and I don't know where I'm going, but I know when I get there. Thank you. Finding Gauguin, because there's this curious image in the background, which for some reason reminded me of some of the pictures that over the years we've seen of Gauguin. But again, that has these dolls, these voodoo dolls and hands, all sorts of images, a fire going on in the background. There's probably 20, 30 layers of images in that particular piece. And then these again are examples of when I got bored with the rectangle 2-3 years ago. I started doing shaped pieces. These were a couple of them. I've done quite a few of them. And of course, the pieces that I passed around for you show the process. And the process is basically, the work is made in my studio on a 44-inch Canon inkjet printer, printed, sent to a studio in Los Angeles, and what they do is they take the print, they mount it with a translucent adhesive to the inside of acrylic, and then they back it with another sheet of acrylic, ready to hang it. And, you know, the prints are done on a matte surface. I don't really want any sort of a tooth or any kind of texture to appear on the piece once it's come off the printer. So once that surface of the acrylic is laid over it, it essentially becomes like a varnish if it were an actual painting on canvas or another board, whichever. And so that's where I am today. The current work that's hanging all came, well, they were all made in the past 2 to 3 months. So I've been busy. Any questions? Ann?
What's the time frame for the ones in the middle?
These here? I think these are done in 23. Yeah, 2023, a couple of years ago. Anybody else?
Do you make smaller sizes of all of these only on request, or?
On request, they could be made, yeah. And usually, I mean, not usually, the pieces are unique. Okay, so I don't do prints per se, but as a for instance, the pieces that I passed around are studies in quotes. Okay, so if somebody sees a study and they would like to have it larger, that's an option. And by the same token, if somebody saw a piece they liked and would like to have a study made of it, that's an option.
What prompted your change from kind of not real objective, but objects that were identifiable to monolith type things that you did?
Well, you know, there's another piece in this series from the early 90s that where the text says, "What we have not done." And as a part of my practice, I've always felt that I'll reach a point where I'm either not as satisfied, maybe a little bit bored with what I've been doing. The work I was doing before this first series of digital work were abstract paintings. Many of them quite large scale. There was a show of them mid last year in Medford at Central Art Supply. And I hadn't actually looked at those in about 40 years and decided, you know what, let's have a look at these. And so the title of the show is 20th Century Painting. And I think they were really good, if I do say myself, but I reached a point in that part of my practice where I was like, I don't know if I can say anything more that's meaningful for myself. And that's when I wanted to start, you know, doing stuff that the mixture of text and imagery became more figurative, hopefully more concrete, if you want. And I think the same thing, in a sense, has happened with this body of work moving towards the circles, the rounds, which I'm showing here. So, although if you look at, I think one of the ones that I passed around has actually an image of this ghost. And one of the things I've done in a lot of the work and in previous work is using one of my first studios in Los Angeles in the mid-70s. I was doing rapidograph pen and ink drawings in sketchbooks. I have hundreds of them. And so this here, this background, is one of those drawings, probably from 1975. But it's brought forward and used in a piece from 2023. And the image that's behind Christian, right behind her there, that I called Bullseye, right there in the corner, is another example of a drawing from that period that's been, it's been manipulated but turned into a piece in a current work. But again, the original drawing is 50 years old. And I love the idea of being able to pull forward stuff that still has a meaningfulness to me, and hopefully to those of you who are looking at it. It's true of the piece in the center there too, the piece that's titled Shield. That's again a drawing from the 70s that's been formulated and changed. But once again, work that was done on the coast of Chautauqua and Pacific Coast Highway in Los Angeles. Anybody else? Larry?
The new pieces have a very meditative quality about them, largely because of the composition. Is that just natural? All art simply has a meditative quality for the artist, but is that an intentional part of your process with these pieces?
Well, you're the only one enough to know how meditative I am. I think it's another example of like accidents that happen. It's kind of, I followed where I was going. I don't know where I'm headed, but I know when I get there, and I just landed on this kind of format, and the stuff just kept coming. And so
The composition itself tends to pull you in, as a device. So I thought perhaps that was part of the plan.
yeah, I'm not really sure. I think it just all sort of kept going, and at a certain point I said, okay, I'm going to stop. And there were certain of them, there were 3 that are kind of in this format of this dark matter piece, this piece here, which is titled, I think this is Polaris, and then there's another piece in the very far back there. So, yeah, it just comes. Yeah.
Do the titles come that way too? Do the titles come that way as well?
Yeah, the title, I'm always, one of the influences, in particular from Paul Clegg, who titled everything he did, and they were often really compelling. I've always enjoyed titling my pieces. And so, the work is first made, and then I look at it and decide what might be the best to tag it with. Yeah.
My question is a little more on the technical side of things.
Sure.
You mentioned you're using a Canon printer with matte papers.
Yes.
Are we talking pigment inks here?
Yes.
Or
Yeah,
dyes?
everything, I refer to them as aqueous pigments, which is water-based pigment.
Yep.
With the irony about the inkjet printers is, you might even say that they're watercolor,
Yeah.
because they're water-based pigment that, sprays onto the paper.
Exactly.
And so maybe I should call them, rather than digital painting, digital watercolors.
And are you using Canon's papers, or are you digging into some of the more?
No, I'm using other papers, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Sure. Paula?
I'm really going to show my ignorance here, because I know you've got some old drawings. You've scanned those and put them into the computer.
Yeah.
What, are you using digital program like Adobe Illustrator or something along those lines to do all the other creation?
Oh, well, everything's fabricated using Photoshop.
Photoshop?
Yeah, okay. So if I either scan, and often it can be a simple photograph. I mean, just taking an iPhone picture of a drawing from 1974, just put it on the computer, and then I can bring it into Photoshop and use it.
But these other, more meditative, those are Photoshop imagination.
Yes, they're all photoshopped and manipulated. What's interesting is that, like, as a for instance, the background to Polaris is a repeated drawing from the mid-70s. So I just shifted it and moved it around. It doesn't move like Bruce's work, but it moves in the process of creating it, and then it's frozen. So I actually have always been drawn to the idea of being fascinated with images being frozen. You know, they're like, okay, done, you know, and where does it go from there, you know? It becomes immediately, it becomes a part of the past. Anybody else?